So, my guest on the influencers this month is, well, this is the first for me, an owner and a director of a zoo. Now, we'll come into that in a second. Frankie Hobro, welcome. Croeso, first of all. And as I said, you are the owner and the director of Anglesey Sea Zoo. Now, let's get straight into it, if we may, Frankie, okay? The word zoo has got all kinds of connotations that go with it, do they? But your place is very different to your usual description of a zoo, isn't it?
It is, yes. Diolch for having me on your podcast. I'm very excited about having the chat about all the things that I do and about the Anglesey Sea Zoo. Yeah, we are an aquarium actually, but Sea Zoo is very apt really for what we do, because we have a very sort of wide zoological background. We do a lot of breeding and conservation work here, and so my sort of background and experience with working through Jersey Zoo, Gerald Wildlife Trust, is what I'm kind of applying for the aquarium. And so I sort of made the decision. I made a lot of changes when I bought the business 14 years ago, and I made the decision that Sea Zoo was really quite appropriate for what we are doing, what we continue to do.
Okay. And you can't really change the name to Anglesey Aquarium, or could you?
You know what, I wouldn't want to, because I think the idea of an aquarium is very much a tank with captive fish in it. Okay. And although part of what we do is have mostly marine animals in captivity, it's not sort of classic stuck in a tank type environment. So what's very unique about the Anglesey Sea Zoo, what we have here, well, there's a lot of things that are quite unique about us, but one of the sort of fundamental unique aspects is that all our water comes from the sea. We're in this amazing location right on the Menai Strait.
Yep.
It's Snowdonia, really stunning location, and all our water is actually pumped. We have two big pumps right at the bottom of the drive in a little kind of white shed, if you like, with a slate roof, and they pump water for about 3 or 4 hours a day. And that water goes through as an open system through all the tanks and exhibits, and then it comes back out again through a stream and back into the sea. So we are, if you like, we're an extension of the sea. So, we're not just kind of closed tanks. We have natural seasonality, we have natural temperature changes, plankton blooms. So all our animals experience this kind of natural environment that they would really have if they were in the wild. And that's something that's deliberate that we're recreating. Yeah. And you find with that kind of environment, you have happy animals, which breed really well, and it's a much more sustainable and ethical way of managing things.
But as you say, it's more than just a zoo or an aquarium. It's also a marine resource centre, conservation, education. But why? I mean, I remember going there many years ago, even before you took over, with the kids in Brinchenkin on the Straits, and I know that part of the world quite well. And I remember it being, what it was. But why Anglesey? Why Brinchenkin? Why there? Where on earth did you, or how on earth did you get to buy this amazing establishment?
Okay, so there's lots of things that I could answer there. So I had connections already with North Wales, and particularly with Anglesey from childhood. So I grew up in the Midlands, very landlocked, very industrial in Coventry. But I've been visiting this area of North Wales since I was a child, very regularly for all my holidays. So I knew the area very well. I loved the area. And then I was doing conservation work abroad on islands. So my speciality ended up being hands-on conservation of endangered species and island conservation management in a lot of very exotic locations. So I originally started that kind of work through Jersey Zoo, which is Gerald Wildlife Trust based at Jersey Zoo. And if you like, I see the Anglesey Sea Zoo as a sort of aquarium version of Jersey Zoo. So the very unique thing that Jersey does, they work there with, they manage populations of endangered species in captivity, but also most importantly in the wild, where they are very threatened or almost extinct. And they manage the habitats and the situations around those species. And they have people in the field doing that kind of ongoing work. And that's the work that I was doing through Jersey Zoo. So I've only really spent a few weeks in Jersey itself. Most of the time I've spent on these islands abroad in these sort of amazing locations, sort of Mauritius and the Seychelles, all these, and New Zealand, places that sound wonderful and amazing. And they are fantastic places to visit and to live. But the kind of work that you're doing is very hands-on. It's kind of critical care, if you like. You're You're out in the field every day. You're living in quite sort of challenging conditions, if you like, often in completely carbon neutral situations. So, you have solar panels and you capture rainwater to wash with and this kind of thing. Picking up skills as you go along. Most importantly, applying those skills to every individual animal and every individual species. And that is a very, very unique thing that Jersey Zoo does. It has this wider picture, and that's what I'm doing here now at the Sea Zoo. So I never thought I would buy a business, but with the skills that I've picked up from all the field work and everything I've done before, that's what I'm now applying, and that's how I'm able to do what I do here so successfully at the Anglesey Sea Zoo. And even the link to that are how I end up coming here. So I did my undergrad degree at Lancaster University, and then got all this sort of hands-on experience on these islands abroad. And I was thinking about further study, but what actually brought me back to North Wales, which is quite interesting, was a prof, John Turner from Ocean Sciences, came out on a project, and I was helping him on a sort of marine survey project in Mauritius. And I mentioned to him that I was looking at further study, and he offered me a funded master's at Ocean Sciences in Bangor University. So that's what then brought me back to North Wales, if you like, and made that kind of connection.
Okay, and I know Bangor University especially has got this particular good reputation for marine sciences and that kind of thing as well, hasn't it?
It has, yeah. They're particularly well recognised for marine sciences. They have the School of Ocean Sciences right on the Menai Strait, which specialises in obviously degrees and further studies in specifically marine biology and all forms of marine science. So I got my master's there, and I did go abroad again for a couple of years from there. But then when the Anglesey Sea Zoo became, was up for sale, then I saw it, I suppose, as an opportunity to recreate the kind of work that I was doing and wanted to do from abroad, but in the UK.
Yeah.
Because of the situation and the fact that it was all natural seawater, the business needed a lot of investment, and it hadn't got a sort of, it was all a little bit fluffy. It hadn't got a very, very clear USP. So what I brought in, I made the decision very quickly that everything was going to be British. And that alone made it unique. It made complete sense because it's seawater from the UK, natural environment from the doorstep. And so it makes it more sustainable and ethical. It also makes the running costs lower. But most importantly, it was something that no one else was doing. So it sounds like a bit of a no-brainer, but it is actually true. There is nobody else that is doing something on the scale like this as an aquarium, which is entirely British, which has only British species. And that, of course, means that you can then focus and make a speciality of that. And that then led to filling lots of niches. So, for example, the fact that possibly because we don't have anywhere that specializes in British species, people in the UK don't know what's in the sea. They don't understand things about, the fact that we have whales and dolphins, eels are everywhere, what you can eat, what you can't eat, what's endangered, what isn't, what the different habitats are like. You go to developing countries and there are people who, are really living on the breadline. Often their children don't go to school as often as they'd like them to, but everyone there knows about the sea. They might not be able to swim. They know about the fish. They know what you find, where, how to prepare it, what to eat, what not to eat, what's poisonous, how to treat it, this kind of thing. But you come to the UK and no one knows any of this stuff at all.
Yeah.
Okay?
I'll talk about that later on, how we change perceptions of the world. But I know that part of it. It's a beautiful part of the world. But what makes you a little bit different? Well, a little bit different, obviously, as well, is the bilingualism. Because you're based in Wales, you've made it a purely bilingual centre, if you like. But I want to talk quickly. Is that you said that you bought it as a business all those years ago? Is there a fine line then in its being a tourist attraction to make a certain amount of money and being a conservation stroke education centre? Is business versus passion, or how do you balance the two, as it were?
Yeah, so that's an interesting one, because that was always my vision from when I bought. And early on, for the first year, there were actually 4 of us. So there was my husband at the time and I, and 2 other partners as well. Within a year, then it was just my husband and I who bought them out. And as of 8 years ago, it's been just me running things on my own. And it's been a gradual progression, but it's been my vision from the very start. I can see that now looking back, was to do what I'm doing now. And exactly because of what you said, because it isn't something that just happens overnight, it has to be something you invest in over time. That's how I've made it become what it has. And that was a conscious decision, because I didn't want to, this might sound very sort of contrary to me being who I am and what I do, but I don't really approve of animals in captivity. You know, I don't at all generally, you know, birds and any animals, unless there's a really specific purpose and a goal and an aim, you know, which is progressive as part of that. And that's what I'm doing here. So, you know, we have animals in a natural environment, they're breeding on their own, they're very well looked after, they're well fed. You know, we can release animals if they get too big, you know, back into the sea. We do stock rotation. And that's all a natural progression. And that's very important to me. I would never have bought a zoo just to keep animals in captivity. And so it was a purpose, if you like, when I made the decision to buy the business, this was the journey that I knew that I was starting on, was to not be just a tourist attraction and an aquarium, but to have all, to encompass everything that went with it, like the research and conservation to protect things, to educate the public so that they help to protect things, to involve the community with the project so that we're an important part of the community where we are, like you say, with the Welsh language speaking as well, you know, so that's part of who we are and what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that. And I think your kind of zoo, in inverted commas, is a bit different from, you know, the traditional, if you like, zoo where there's tigers and lions and giraffes, you know, behind cages, as well, because your animals are a bit different. It sort of makes your whole concept, your whole business theme, I suppose, a bit different from, I don't know, Chester Zoo, Bristol Zoo, whatever, even Foley Farm. But so in a way, you're quite lucky, you know, your animals are a bit different, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, that's why I'm doing it. You know, I wouldn't want to do it, as I say, if I just had animals in captivity. But it's interesting as well, because it does make it a little bit tricky, because I don't actually fit into any specific categories, you know. So most zoos, if you have a collection of zoo animals, you know, it's very, very much recognized that you do everything you can to, you know, maintain those animals in captivity, because, you know, generally you're talking about things like lions and tigers that can't just be like re-released or let out there, you know. When you're looking at something like I've got, which is native species, you know, which if they escape, they survive perfectly well on their own, just swimming around outdoors, then it is a very, very different situation. And so that's presented some challenges in a way as well. But the nice thing is now I've kind of gone around, you know, done this whole sort of around turn with it. And it's now something that is a very, very positive thing, which I'm building on, you know, rather than being seen as an obstacle. It's quite reassuring, really. In the last sort of 14, 15 years since I bought the business, there has been a very, very big change in attitude in general. It's been a very slow one. It's been gradual, but when I look back now, there has been a big change in attitude. You know, on the whole sort of environmental and sustainability side, and the whole, you know, the idea about sort of, you know, captivity and what it's about and what is right and what isn't, and sort of, you know, being able to re-release animals and the whole ethical side of that as well.
Yeah, well, that's things are changing, as you say, slowly but surely. We'll talk about that later on. Let's go back, if we may, to the early days, Frankie. You said you were from Coventry. You probably didn't see the sea from one day to the other, apart from going on holiday to this morning, fair enough. But what was your upbringing like? What was your education like in that part of the world?
I was fortunate. I had a very good education. But and I mean, I was very streetwise. I think Coventry had the highest crime rate in the UK for several years while I was growing up there.
Okay.
You know, there were some places you didn't go in daylight, let alone.
Well, Coventry is a city in the special song, isn't it? The ghost town, isn't it? It's based on Coventry.
Yeah. So that's right. Yeah.
Tough place to grow up.
It was actually. It was. And one thing I certainly learned is that I'm not a city person, which is quite interesting. So I've kind of gravitated away from the city environment since I left when I went to university. I haven't really returned. And it's not a coincidence that I now live on an island on Anglesey. You know, I'm an island and sea person and an outdoors person. I love visiting cities, but after 2 or 3 or 4 days, then I'm ready to leave again. I'm very much a being out in the sticks person.
Yeah, I think I'm the same. But going from Coventry then to places like, you know, the Seychelles and Mauritius, you must have thought, oh my God, this is me. This is what I'm all about. Yes, going to Mauritius, for goodness sake, from Coventry.
Yeah, well, do you know what? It's interesting because so when I look at the first project I had, so I had a gap, what they call a gap year now. In those days, nobody did it, you know, and it was called, you know, having a year out, and it was like, oh, and you'll never go to uni, and you know, and it was a bit mad in hindsight because I'd not really been anywhere apart from, you know, a couple of exchange trips you know, with the school. And my poor mum, I think, must have been very, very worried because this is like pre-mobile phones, pre-internet, really. You know, we're talking, you know, sort of 90s here. And that then, but by the time I went to university, I knew that I wanted to do that kind of thing abroad. You know, I got very passionate about the conservation side because I've been to Australia for 3 months of my year out, gone bushwalking with a sort of family friend who was a mentor, who's a zoologist. And so there was the sort of excitement, there was definitely the passion there about it. But this is the thing, it's all very well me sitting here, and it probably sounds almost as if I'm making this stuff up, but it actually isn't for everybody. You know, there are some people who go out on a project like this and it isn't their thing. Quite often they do it for 6 months and then they're ready to move on. Sometimes, you know, it isn't the kind of thing, it's not for everyone to be out in the sticks, you know, having to survive with that. I mean, my family holidays were camping holidays, that probably set me up for it quite a lot as well. But if you are the right kind of person and you're very, very passionate about what you want to do, it's the best possible environment to be in, because you basically hit the ground running, you know, and you're being kind of thrown into stuff like ringing endangered species, tagging endangered species, you know, chasing stuff, abseiling, climbing trees, monitoring nest sites. You know, you're left to it, you're given all the skills and the toolbox that you need, and you're taught very much on the job. And so if it's for you, like it was, then for me, then it really takes off. And I think the most important thing about the project, you know, is that they were very, very good at choosing the right people. And that's something that I've brought myself into the job now in the business. It's about getting the right people.
Yeah. I mean, it seems to me like you were always going to do this kind of work. I mean, was there anything else that took your interest when you were at school, or, you know, growing up? Were you sporty, or were you, you know, academic, or were you always going to go in this direction?
It's interesting because I always wondered what exactly I was meant to do, and it's interesting. I've kind of created a role for myself, if you like, because you know, the job I wanted to do didn't exist. I kind of knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to do this kind of stuff, you know, outdoors stuff. I've always been an outdoors person. I've always enjoyed sports and team sports and stuff as well, but I've also always really enjoyed just being outside. I kind of knew I didn't want to be a vet, but I really loved doing the animal welfare and the animal care side and the hands-on animal work. And so now, of course, I do animal rescue, which is, you know, almost exactly that kind of thing. So I suppose what I've ended up doing along the way with the experience I've built up in this kind of thing, I've created the perfect job for myself here in the perfect location. And now I'm able to share that with other people, which is even, you know, even more fantastic.
Yeah, it sounds as if it's an idyllic lifestyle and a choice, and it sounds amazing. It really, really does. But after saying that, you know, buying this sea zoo, which maybe had seen better days, with all respect, all those years ago, was a big move for you and your husband at the time, and as you say, 2 others. What challenges, what obstacles did you have? Would you do something different now looking back? Did you have enough support, or were you left on your own?
So, I mean, looking back, I had very different visions of what I wanted to do with the business than the other people I was doing it with. So there's no doubt that, you know, that it wasn't really ever going to work from the start in that respect. So the first year or so was quite difficult. But that, I think, was part of the process of me recognizing, you know, what my visions were and what I was wanting to do. I never thought I would run a business, and I have to be very honest, if I'd known quite what was involved, I probably would never have got involved in buying the business.
Really?
So in hindsight, it's a good job that I didn't know, really, because one thing I am very good at is adapting and dealing with situations when I'm kind of thrown in to deal with them, and that's very much, you know, part of, you know, you progress from the firefighting after a few years of owning a business, but that's certainly what it's like early on. So that was something that was very clear in my head. I see now from the early days, and I'm very, very glad now. There was a moment sort of about 6, 7, 8 years ago where I wondered if this was the right route to be on, you know, with the environmental and investing in the sustainability, purely really from a profits point of view, you know, and an investment point of view. But it definitely was, you know, it absolutely was, and I see that now. And sticking to that unique selling point and you know, our offering is what has now made us stand out, and it's made, you know, it's made us into what we are.
But were you supported right from the very beginning by the locals, for example, the area, the island, the council? You know, did you have any kind of you know, help from councils and governments and that kind of thing?
You know what? I didn't really. It's taken a long time. It's been a long time coming. There wasn't the agreement and the support with the four of us partners to start off with, which is why it's a very good thing that I've ended up doing it on my own, because I have a very clear vision, and it has worked very, very well. While it's been the last 8 years or so, when it's been just me with that clear vision, you know, it really has taken off because I've been able to focus that. I was in quite a tricky situation, to be honest, with the business. Again, it's much easier in hindsight now. Because it was recognised as a very well-established local business, local tourist attraction, but so it wasn't a startup, you know, because when you're a startup, you get lots of support and funding and everything thrown at you for the first few years. It was an ongoing business, but it needed a huge amount of investment and improvement and maintenance very, very well, pretty much as soon as I bought it. And so what I'd done, fortunately, I decided early on that I was going to be doing the ongoing maintenance and replacement with more expensive sort of systems and pumps and whatever, but things that could be, you know, were much more efficient over time and could be replaced as parts rather than a whole, you know, buying a whole new system. So that's much more efficient and sustainable in the longer term. So in the short term, you know, you've kind of got this short-term loss of profits because you're kind of ploughing everything back in. But in the longer term, it really pays off. So for the first few years, it's kind of almost very frustrating because there's one thing after another. And you kind of think, gosh, can I afford to keep doing it this way? But at the same time, you know, it takes a while. And again, my experience abroad has been valuable for this. It takes you quite a few years to become established as part of the community with something like this. And again, it's having that long-term vision, you know, especially somewhere like here in Anglesey, you know, it's a very, very important Welsh-speaking area. You know, I love the fact that my kids are Welsh. They go to school, they speak Welsh at school, you know, fluently. And that's something that is very important to the business. You know, we are the only bilingual aquarium. There's no one else that offers everything in Welsh and English, and it's kind of incorporated into a bilingual community like we are here. And that does take a while. You know, Anglesey, we have a lot of second homers, we have a lot of tourism as well, of course. And so it takes several years to become part of the community and get that kind of community involvement, you know, with local schools and local people.
But I think you've been you've been adopted 100% now. And I know that part of the world has got, you know, Hallen Moon, and it's got the National Trust property. Was it got what's the Penryn? No, Plasnewydd. Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing stretch of coastline, and you've all sort of been accepted, as far as I'm concerned, into local life, if you like. Before we go any further, Frankie, I'm going to spring something on you now, okay? I should have told you, a little bit cheeky of me, but I'm going to give you 10 quickfire questions, okay? And you can answer, you can elaborate as much as you want. So I'm going to put the clock on now. Rugby or football?
Rugby.
Okay. Are you a...
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay, fine. Are you a glass half empty or glass half full kind of person? And I think
glass half full.
Yeah, I thought you were. Yeah. Who was your first childhood crush?
Ooh, that's an interesting one. Probably Adam Ant, actually.
Adam Ant. Oh my word. Oh my word. Okay.
Or George Michael, one or the other.
Okay, I can see you now with the wall paint posted on your wall. I can see it now. Okay. White wine or red wine?
There's a really good reason for that as well, because when you've worked on islands in the middle of nowhere with no refrigeration for years, red wine always tastes good at any temperature.
Oh, good. Yeah, very handy. Okay. What would you say is your greatest weakness, Frankie?
Probably saying no to people.
No.
Not saying no to
Not
people.
saying no. Okay, yeah.
Not being able to. Yeah. Because I'm always very keen to be involved in things if I think I can make a difference. And so I find it very difficult to be selective about what I am and I'm not involved in, if that makes sense.
Sure, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Okay, who would you say you admire the most? Is there one person that stands out that you admire?
So I have two. My mum is always going to be my. My mum did an absolutely fantastic job. She was a single mum like me, did a fantastic job, bringing me up, and has always been very influential. She's always encouraged me to do the things I want to do. Like I say, I mean, now I'm a parent, I realise how terrifying it must have been for her when I hit 18 and said, right, I'm off around the world, mum, see you in a year, and also, I know it's the classic one, but David Attenborough. Particularly, I mean, I remember him as a child, introducing people to all these amazing sort of aspects and parts of the world. But recently, the last few years, it's fantastic the way he's adapted to raise awareness more, to bring people in and harness people in on the issues and to help try and tackle the issues, that are becoming, crisis, the sort of crisis with the planet.
I mean, he is amazing, considering how, he's of an age as well. He still is this influential man.
I'd love to meet him, actually.
I think we all would.
Get to meet him. I could talk to him for hours about all kinds of things. But yeah.
I have tried, but he's very, very busy. Dogs or cats?
Dogs.
Good.
Again, there's a kind of a specific reason for that. I love all animals, but unfortunately, there was quite a large aspect of predator control on some of the projects I was on islands, and we had a lot of feral cats. So I've seen the damage that cats can inflict on, birds in particular, but also a lot of other very vulnerable species. Yeah.
That's an interesting answer. Okay, we haven't had that before. What about tea or coffee?
Coffee.
Okay. Are you a morning person or a nighttime person?
More of a nighttime person, although I do love when I'm out doing field work, is normally when I'm out early, and I love that really peaceful, start of the day with nothing around. But generally, I'm more of a nighttime person.
Okay. I know you have a bit of both on the island, obviously, of Anglesey, but walking in the mountains or walking on the beach?
Oh, that's a really hard one. That's a really hard one. If it was climbing on the mountains or walking on the beach, I would be completely torn. I don't know. That's a really hard one.
You have got a wonderful coastline as well. Okay.
I usually dive in the sea and climb in the mountains. So, but yeah.
Okay, I see that. Okay. And the last one then. Well, last but one actually. When was the last time you danced?
I dance with the kids quite a lot.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. I mean, a lot of people dance in the kitchen, apparently. Are you one of them?
Yeah, doing all the floss stuff and everything. Yeah, so that's probably the last time that I danced.
Oh, God.
But before that, it would have been whenever I was last able to have a night out with the girls, which was pre-COVID, so a very long time ago.
So at least 2 years ago. Yeah, okay. And final question, and this is not on my list, but it's from me. How the hell do you look after your hair, which is fabulous? It's incredible hair. How do you look after it?
Do you know what? I don't do very much in my hair. I kind of let it do its thing most of the time. Okay. And generally people seem to think it looks quite good, so I leave it. It's actually quite useful having really long hair because you can just tie it back out of the way when you need to.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Whereas I know the people who have sort of styled hair and short hair, they're always having to sort of apply products and that kind of thing. So yeah, I'm quite fortunate because it's a bit mad most of the time, but I can control it when I need to. So
I think it's very much you. It's very much your character, isn't it? Now, we discussed earlier on about perceptions, attitude. How difficult is it then, in all seriousness, to change people's perceptions, their attitudes about conservation, about protecting our natural world and our seas, especially because it's your specialty? I mean, are you on a losing battle, or are you constantly battling against it, or is it becoming easier?
It is becoming easier, definitely. It's this long-term vision. It's sticking at something, and also it's doing it through engagement. Because people are bombarded by sort of negative facts about the planet and about the environment all the time. And you get to the stage where you've got the people who are sort of in denial, who are always going to be the harder ones to reach. But you've also got the people who genuinely do want to do something, but they almost feel so overwhelmed by the problems that they're not doing much because they don't think there's much they can do. So it's engaging people and showing them how they can do just a few small things to make a very positive change. And then all those small things, you know, thrown in together can make a massive, massive difference.
Yeah, but you lead by example. You're encouraging. You're almost shaming others, basically, in doing the same. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose you're right. It is shaming in a way, because at least now I've got to the stage where I can turn around and say, well, I've been doing this for over a decade. Isn't it about time other people did it? It's not even just individuals, it's at a higher level as well. It's at a governmental level, you know, either sort of a local government level or a national government level and a global level, if you like, because that's the other thing. If there's lots of people like me doing the right thing, then we're still not going to progress unless we have, you know, a much wider, higher positive change. And I suppose that's my biggest concern, my biggest disappointment. There's a lot of sort of everyday people and even more businesses now getting on board with the environmental side, but we're not seeing those really positive changes that we need to have from the higher level to make it possible for people to progress and do more positive environmental things.
And as you said earlier on, is it a particularly British problem? Are attitudes different in Britain, as you said earlier on? You know, other parts of the world are more in tune with it, if you like. But it seems to me a particularly British attitude that, and you've got all these documentaries on Netflix, you know, about the sea conspiracy and all that kind of thing. Does that kind of thing help? Does it hinder? It's a big question.
I think sometimes, this is what I mean about engagement. I think it's really important that people recognise that this stuff is on their doorstep, because I think it's quite a British thing for some people to think that they're not affected by it. It's other places, because they see it on the TV and they see the problems on the other side of the world. It's like, well, you know, that's that country, it's not us, and that's not what we're doing. Whereas when you have that engagement, so an example is beach cleaning. So when I take people to clean a beach, I always see that for the first time they're there and they're finding, you know, all the rubbish that's there on the tide line. That's, some of it's been washed in, some of it's land-based and just been thrown or left. It completely changes their attitude. So first of all, there's something about picking up other people's rubbish that makes you get, you know, it riles them a bit. They're like, you know, why am I, you know, why are people, and why, and that automatically makes them think about their own habits and how they can change it, you know. Simple things like using cotton bud sticks. Don't put them down the toilet. Use ones that are made from cardboard, because they're littered everywhere, and this is how they get here, because people don't dispose of them properly. Balloon releases is another one, you know, and this is one which is a huge, this is a really good example of an issue. So we still see balloon releases on a big scale, and it's quite often in you know, memorandum of people or charities or organizations releasing these balloons. I find balloons littered all over our beaches. Sometimes they're entangled in wildlife, they've strangled something, or, you know, they're everywhere, and they're coming from people who are deliberately releasing balloons en masse. And that's a really good example. It's getting people to think about, you know, where are these balloons going to go? Is there not an alternative that you could do? Could you not plant a tree instead? Something you could watch and you know, engage. And you know, if it doesn't come here, it will go on the other side of the world somewhere. And what kind of an example is that setting for people on the other side of the world? If they find a balloon that someone in the UK has released that says in memory of, you know.
Yeah. Good point. I mean, I'm a trustee for Keeper Society, so I'm familiar with all this kind of thing and beach cleaning and everything. But what's it going to take? I mean, how many images do we need to see of, you know, a plastic thing around a seal's neck, or you know, people helping whales and dolphins because they've been entangled in plastic, or, you know, ducks and geese and whatever, and fish dying because of the plastic? What's it going to take? I mean, it's almost like a constant bombardment of these images, but nothing seems to change. Or am I being a bit too negative here?
No, I agree with you. And I think, again, it's about engagement. It's about people having to be involved in something and actually recognize, you know, put together the event, the picture, the dead animal or whatever, with something that they've actually done or they've seen somebody done that they could have prevented. And it's actually quite hard to do that in everyday life, because people are very disconnected. You know, they put the rubbish in a bin and it disappears and they never think about it again, or they're recycling, you know, and you have to make that connection. And then it's very easy, because there are lots of ways that people on an individual basis can make a huge difference, you know, with things like single-use plastics and refill schemes on a daily basis. And a lot of people, they don't even have a really good reason or an excuse for not doing that. They just haven't got around to it yet, or they haven't, had that little bit of an incentive or that push. And this is where governments and policies are really, really useful, because if you make that push by introducing a 5p charge on carry bags, for example, which means that all of a sudden it's no more excuses, whatever, everyone has to bring their own bags now, and they do. That's the kind of thing that makes a lot of difference, and when everybody is doing that, then it makes a huge difference to the whole scale of the problem.
And I think Welsh government, thankfully, have got it sort of right in a way. They are making all kinds of inroads, with the Minister for Future Generations, and I know they've got a climate change department and that kind of thing. But let's talk quickly then about entrepreneurship. I know you're a big supporter of entrepreneurship in general, certainly in Wales. You also support the STEM schemes, all right? How have things changed with regards to girls and women becoming more involved in this world? Are we still got a long way to go, or are things changing and improving slowly?
We do still have a distance to go. I don't think we certainly don't have as far to go as when I was kind of starting to do it. And this is one of the things that I love about the STEM side and the big ideas side and the entrepreneurism side, because like I say, just going back to when I was at school, it was a year out and you weren't going to go anywhere with it. Whereas nowadays it's a gap year and it's encouraged. It's definitely one of the best things I ever did. And even when I was doing my A-levels and to an extent my GCSEs, there were boxes. There were boxes, you were either in science or you were in arts, and that you didn't mix them and all this kind of thing. And so I was kind of breaking boundaries with that, because I knew, I wanted to do science, but I wanted to do, creative science, like hands-on stuff. I didn't want to, do kind of, physics and maths with it. I wanted to do, biology with psychology and with all these. And things are now getting a lot better in that respect, certainly. And also with the skills-based side of academia, that's what I want to put forward with this kind of work. The fact that, that this is basically care work. It's environmental care work. It's conservation is care work. It's not caring for people. It's caring for animals and caring for the environment. And it's an interesting transition really with the business. So when I look at when I was abroad doing the voluntary work I was doing, there were a few parents that made comments to my mum at the time. She didn't say anything to me till quite a long time after, but there were quite a few parents that were saying, aren't you concerned about Frankie, because she's bumming around on these islands doing all this, enjoying herself and whatever, but is she ever going to get a real job? Aren't you worried that she'll never get a house, she'll never have a real career? And in a way you can understand that attitude, because you're in Mauritius on an island, you're in the Seychelles on an island. That's how they see it. That's their perception of being successful and not being successful, if you've got a really good steady job and you're buying a house or not, kind of thing. And then of course I came back and I bought the business, and I have this 50 plus staff in August and all this responsibility, and now they think, oh my goodness, you must be so proud of what an amazing position to have. And I'm kind of thinking, I couldn't have done this without doing that. It's all, a lot of it is about perception, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I've got 3 girls myself, and I think the barriers are still there in a way, and obstacles are still there. There's always this pressure of, as you say, settling down, getting married, having kids, blah, blah, blah. But, it's 2021, for goodness sake. I can't believe things still haven't changed. Let's talk about future plans then. Now, I'm presuming that you, like every other business and a tourist attraction, have been affected by the pandemic and COVID and lockdowns and things. How have you coped, first of all, with that? And then what are your future plans?
Until I reopened nearly a month ago, so from March 2020 for a year, I was only trading for 14 weeks, which was pretty dire, as you can imagine, because all the outgoing costs were pretty much the same. I was able to furlough staff to an extent, but obviously all the conservation work and the animal welfare work, all that was continuing, so we had to have the full-time staff still doing that. Right. It was the most challenging time I've ever been through, which is saying something when you think I've been through buyouts and divorces and all kinds of other stuff. And do you know what? It's all about, I think, resourcefulness, resilience, and being able to adapt. Because I kind of went back into the business and was covering all the different roles that needed to be covered. along with the other staff that were still here working full time. Obviously, I was also having to, apply for funding. We got our own crowdfunding. My kids were helping out a lot. They're at the age where they were helping. So they were helping me down in the rock pool. We were foraging around in the rock pool, catching, crabs and prawns to feed the animals and that kind of thing. They're helping to release the lobsters and helping the work to carry on, if you like. So there was a huge amount of adaptation, and definitely, like I say, it's about being resilient, I think, and just having to keep your head down and carry on with it. The hardest part, particularly being in Wales, was the limbo, because everything was an unknown. We had no dates, we had no guidance on anything. It was a complete unknown as to how long we were going to be closed, what the guidelines would be when we were open. And so that's, I think, been probably the most difficult part of it.
Yeah.
But I'm really, really proud of, I lost several members of staff, but the team I've got now, and I've got some new staff on board as well, fantastic. Really proud of the team that we still have who made it through that. That is a true test, really, isn't it?
It sure is. It sure is. It says a lot about you and your work ethic and how you treat your staff. And that, your kids must have been, what an amazing place to grow up, and what a wonderful life they must have. But this goes out in July, Frankie. Goodness only knows where we'll be by then. But where do you see yourself in years to come? Do you have any plans to extend or to add on or to go somewhere else? Or what are the future plans?
Yeah, I do. So we're finishing some renovations at the moment, which I hope will be finished by July, by the sort of busy part of the summer holidays. With sort of funding that we've carried over from COVID, really. We've got some Welsh Government funding for sort of development on the new exhibit side. And obviously that's been kind of held up in various ways with lockdowns and things. So we'll have that up and running for the summer. And then I'm feeling very positive now. Finally, I think we're at the stage for this green economy, this sustainable development. I think we are going to see investment in this, I hope. And that's really what I've been waiting for. So I have a field which is more than twice the size of the plot that I'm already on with the business. And for several years now, I've been working on, I've got plans in place for a sustainable build to more than double the size of the business, to make the business completely net zero. And this is something that's very much needed, obviously, economically on Anglesey, for the area, employment-wise, and also as a product. We'll have a sort of bespoke education area and lecture theatre, function rooms, much bigger cafe area, this kind of thing.
Oh, excellent.
But the plan is for it to be a completely sustainable build. So obviously, along with that is the cost. It costs a lot more to build something that way sustainably. So and we're looking at over £1 million. So, it's quite a hit, but and obviously loans and funding sort of combined. So that's the bigger picture that I'm currently working on now. We're finally coming into the sort of growth and development, out of COVID, the recovery period, if you like, with this promise, which I think is going to come into fruition. I've been waiting over 10 years for this, but I think we will actually enter this, sustainable development and this green revolution that's been promised now for quite a long time. I certainly hope so.
Yeah, well, and if anybody can do it, oh my God, you can definitely do it. So how do people get hold of Anglesey Zoo? What's the best way to, you've got a website, obviously, you're on social media. How do people get involved as well with the kind of work you do?
Yeah, well, we like people to. So we have lots of community, sort of voluntary community projects going on. The sort of quick and easy one that a lot of people get involved in is our beach cleans, because we have a beach clean at least once a month from the Sea Zoo, just on our local beach here. But we're also an environmental hub for litter picking, so people can borrow their own kits if they want to do a beach clean elsewhere around the Anglesey or North Wales. They can sign it in and sign it out, and we give them a little bit of guidance on that. We've also got marine animal rescue. We work with people a lot on that. We get phone calls, if people find a stranded animal on the beach or an animal that needs assistance, and we go out and do that. Just on our sort of awareness raising side, we've got sort of various little projects that we have ongoing with people within the community. But most importantly, coming to visit, because when people visit, we try to engage them. We encourage them to chat to the staff about different things and go down to the seashore and look for things and discuss things. Social media, we're very, very active. So we post at least once a day, and we have lots of links to other organisations that we work with as well. So all our social media channels are a really good way of keeping up with us. And
so
we're also updating our website. So
yeah.
it's the best.
But if people put Anglesey Sea in social media, they'll come across you and win with it.
Yeah.
Apologies, my phone went off.
Okay.
You said animal rescue. Do you have any sort of phone calls with any sort of strange or exotic or unusual or animals that shouldn't really be there? I'm thinking of the walrus down in Pembrokeshire recently. Do you have that kind of?
We have had, yeah. So most commonly is seals and seal pups. This obviously has all kind of come from my background working with animals, hands-on with animals. We work with British Dive and Marine Life Rescue and the RSPCA as well, but we also work independently on the rescue side. Dolphins, I've refloated several dolphins locally. Seabirds is another quite common one. That we're most famous, however, seeing as you mentioned exotic animals, for Menai the turtle. And it will be 5 years in November since she washed up, and she's still a record-breaking turtle for her species. So she was an olive ridley turtle. It's the first time an olive ridley has ever been seen in British waters since 1748, when the record keeping began. And she was almost
ordinarily then.
She was washed up literally on the seashore at the bottom of our drive. The nearest place they're found is the southern part of the Atlantic. So basically around sort of, Brazil, or off the coast of sort of Central Africa. So so she was a long way off course.
A long way from home, as was the walrus, I think, in Tenby in Cornwall. Okay, well, Frankie, thank you very, very much for your time. Diolch yn fawr iawn. I'm going to give you one final question, okay? Now, I know you've been traveling, for many years, and I'm sure you've been on many islands, and I know you're on an island now, but I'm going to put you on a desert island, okay? You can have a little break, just you, no kids, Frankie, no business, no phones, no plugs, nothing. But what is the one luxury item that you'd like to take with you? What is the one thing, oh, I have to take this?
It would probably be a device to play music on of some kind.
Okay, music a big part of your life?
Or binoculars would be the other one.
Or binoculars, okay, that's fine. And would you be good on your own on this island? Could you cope?
I think I'd love it for a while, yeah. I might start to, go a bit loopy, but it would take a while. I quite like a bit of peace and quiet now and then. And if I'm surrounded by nature, it depends what else is on the island. If it's a kind of, nature reserve island, then I'd be in my element for a very long time.
You'd be in your element. You'd be making all kinds of discoveries in land and sea, wouldn't you?
Yeah. If I can jump in the sea as well and see things there, that'd be fantastic. Yeah. So I'd be very happy indefinitely in that kind of situation.
Yeah, I don't blame you. One day, Frankie, you'll get there. You'll get there.